Okay, I think most everybody's been admitted. Welcome everybody to the Woods Hole Historical Museum conversation on Penikese Island, its history and its new mission. I'm Debbie Scanlon, and we have three speakers here. Kimberly Ulmer is the Executive Director of the Penikese Island School. Justin Reynolds and Ana Kielson are co-founders and directors of the Gull Island Institute. Kimberly is going to start by giving us an overview of the history of the island, and then she'll tell us about the environmental education programs that have been held there at the school since 2019. And then she will turn this over to Justin and to Ana to talk about the Gull Island Institute. You have been muted, but if you have questions, you can put them in chat. And at the end of the presentations, I will read the questions and they will be answered by our speakers. One more thing, this is being recorded because we like to put this on our website, a recording of our website. I guess that's it. So I'm happy to welcome Kimberly Ulmer, the director of the Penikese Island School.
Thanks, Debbie, and thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to be charged with stewarding the Penikese Island School into the new future of environmental education programming. As Debbie said, I'm going to start off with a brief history of Penikese, which is actually a real challenge because Penikese has had quite an interesting and varied history. And then I'll talk a little bit about our current mission and programming, which includes and will dovetail into Justin and Ana talking a bit more about the Gull Island Institute. So I'm going to share my screen and some slides for you all. Does that work? Okay, great. Good. So I thought first I would just orient everybody. So hopefully the locals that are tuned in recognize these landforms. For you non-locals, you're looking at Cape Cod and the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. So hopefully everyone can find Penikese Island. Oh dear, I'm having trouble progressing in my slides. All right. So there's Penikese Island. It's located at the west end of the Elizabeth Island chain. And as you can tell from this aerial view, it's a pretty small island. So Penikese Island is about 75 acres, and it was at one point originally a forest, but now it's primarily a grassland. There's a few trees and a few ponds and primarily rocky beaches. And it's currently owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Division of Fish and Wildlife manages it as a wildlife sanctuary for endangered terns, particularly the roseate and the least tern. So there's a mixed colony on Penikese Island that consists of common terns, roseate terns, least terns as well. And so the state owns the island, but we, the Penikese Island School, own our buildings and maintain the walking paths. And we generally have a wonderful working relationship with the Commonwealth. So in terms of geologic history, Penikese arrived on the scene about 20,000 years ago. So this is when the giant ice sheet that covered Canada and the northern part of the United States began to retreat and left behind the Cape and Islands. So Penikese likes to boast that we have one of the largest glacial erratics. For those of you that are wondering what that means, it means we have a large rock. So these glaciers left behind a mixture of rock sizes from giant boulders to the finest silt and clay. And we have a particularly large glacial erratic on Penikese named the Plough. The first written history of Penikese comes from some extensive journals taken by Bartholomew Gosnold starting in the year 1602. Before Gosnold, it's speculated that Leif Erikson and the Vikings probably visited this area probably around the year 1000, and that fishermen from the Azores and Ireland and the Arctic probably also frequented the area. But it's Gosnold who sort of attributed to naming Cape Cod for the plethora of cod fish that were around, and also for naming Martha's Vineyard for his daughter Martha, and for naming what he called Cuttyhunk, he called it Elizabeth Island for the queen at the time, Queen Elizabeth. So Gosnold and his men found the soil to be fertile on Cuttyhunk and decided to set up an outpost there. They named Penikese Hills Hap, and in these logbooks, these extensive journals, they remarked that Penikese had a great stand of cedar trees at the time. So of course, as we know, Gosnold himself did not discover this place, and that there were inhabitants living here in the area. So the Wampanoag tribe has inhabited Massachusetts and into Rhode Island for the last 12,000 years. And it's estimated that at the time that Gosnold was around in the 1600s, that over 40,000 Wampanoag were living in this area. So the Wampanoag tribe used Penikese specifically as a hunting, fishing, and shell fishing place. And pictured on the right is a giant from the Wampanoag legends. His name is Moshop, and the Wampanoag credit Moshop with creating the islands and also with teaching the Wampanoag how to fish and how to catch whales. So this copper plate engraving from 1634 is depicting Captain Bartholomew coming ashore and trading with the Wampanoag. So this is sort of a nice, maybe friendly image, but in the journals, Gosnold remarks that the Wampanoag that were on Penikese specifically were scared into hiding, and Gosnold and some of his men stole their canoe and brought it back to Europe. So not exactly the nicest first interaction, shall we say. In the 1600s, King James gave Martha's Vineyard and the Elizabeth Islands to Reverend Thomas Mayhew. And from the 1600s through the 1700s and into the 1800s, Penikese specifically was used primarily for pasturing sheep. It changed hands through many different owners, but most of them were farmers, fishermen, and almost all had sheep. So the islands were harvested for their wood and sort of denuded of trees. And at one point there was a brief fish oil factory on Penikese. And at the end of the 1800s, wealthy tobacconist from New York City, John Anderson, purchased the island and established a retreat for himself from busy New York City life. And so he built a large house, but of course also had a barn and sheep and a boathouse. And to this day, you can still see the rock walls from some of these sheep pastures on Penikese Island. So in 1873, Louis Agassiz, who was a renowned Swiss naturalist and geologist, was a professor at Harvard, and he was able to convince John Anderson, this wealthy owner of Penikese, to let him establish a school of natural history on the island. Agassiz was well known for his fish classifications and for sort of popularizing this idea of ice ages and glaciers. And so he picked Penikese in particular because Penikese's glacial moraine was the perfect place for him to lecture on his glacial theory, and also the cold waters from the north and these sort of warm Gulf Stream influenced waters that we have, as we all know, leads to a wide variety and diversity of marine fauna in the area. So Anderson himself had owned the island and had been summering there in his summer home prior to Agassiz proposing to set up this natural science school. And Anderson philanthropically gifted Agassiz the island and $50,000. And with that, they quickly built a dormitory, a classroom, a dining hall, and opened up shop in July of 1873. Unfortunately, Agassiz passed away that December, and his son Alexander ran the school for one more season, and there was a fire in 1875. So the school only lasted 2 seasons, but some of the students from this school went on to found the Marine Biological Laboratory here in Woods Hole in 1888. And so this next photo is from the MBL archives. This is not from the Anderson School specifically, but it was noted in this photograph that this botany course that they were collecting specimens on Penikese as part of their course in 1895. And I feel like it gives a great sort of sense of that Victorian era of naturalist collecting and the sort of observational biology of the times. And it's worth also noting that Agassiz had about a third of his students were women at this Anderson School of Natural History. There was a very brief stint where there was a turkey farm on the island, but then the state purchased the island by eminent domain in 1905 to establish a leprosarium. So at the time, what we now call Hansen's disease was not very well understood, and people were very nervous that it was highly contagious, and there was public uproar with having a leprosarium on the mainland, and so Penikese was chosen for its remote nature. And Dr. Frank Parker and his wife Marion provided really wonderful care for their patients on this island, and they themselves never caught Hansen's disease. As we have learned more about this disease, 95% of the population is naturally immune to Hansen's disease, and it's a bacterial infection that can kind of be avoided with, good hygiene like hand washing or using alcohol wipes. And also, if you do contract Hansen's disease, it's treated with a combination of antibiotics. So Dr. Parker and his wife not only provided medical attention to their patients, but they also provided them with an education and some sort of light farming, landscaping, leisure activities, and helped them sort of build their self-esteem by giving them paying jobs. And then with their funds, they were able to purchase small items at stores in New Bedford. Many of the patients that came to Penikese with Hansen's disease were immigrants who spoke little to no English at all. And the leprosarium was closed in 1921 when we opened a national hospital in Carville, Louisiana. So all told, there were 36 patients that were treated on the island of Penikese. 16 died and were buried there, and 13 were then transferred to this national facility in Louisiana in 1921. So this image here is depicting sort of the ruins of what was the laundry building for the leper colony. And the state next established a bird sanctuary, and they burned all the leper buildings and dynamited most of the cement walls. So there are still some ruins, a bit of the foundations of some of the structures. And this laundry building is sort of the most prominent structure left from the leprosarium days. In 1924, the state established Penikese as a wildlife sanctuary, and originally, funny enough, they wanted to raise game birds like pheasants and quail, and also cottontail and snowshoe rabbits. And in addition to that, they wanted to encourage the breeding of wild waterfowl such as geese and ducks and terns. Pretty quickly, they dropped the pheasants and the quail and focused a little bit more on bolstering the cottontail population, and eventually focused more on the tern population. So to this effort of creating a wildlife sanctuary, they burned, like I said, they burned all of the existing leprosarium buildings. They expanded one of the ponds on Penikese. They planted some grasses that they thought the birds would like, and they made it illegal to collect tern eggs. So if we go back a bit in time to the 1800s, tern eggs were a delicacy, and they also were, terns' feathers were popular as plumes in hats. So I found this in an ornithology journal where a resident from Cuttyhunk remarks, "I took in one day in June 1896, 182 eggs, and a friend of mine gathered 295 in one day, and for the season, 900. So it's no surprise that the tern population declined. In 1933, it was found that storm petrels were nesting on Penikese. So the storm petrel generally nests in Maine and points further north. So it was exciting to see that the Leach's storm petrel was nesting on Penikese, and to this day, they continue to nest in a retaining wall on the island. Lots of fun bird action happening on Penikese through time. So during this time as a wildlife sanctuary from the 20s and the 30s up until World War II, there were different caretakers on the island, particularly the Turner family. And again, the state's efforts were mostly to rebuild these bird populations and rabbit populations. But in 1941, when Turner left, the state saw no more need for rabbits, and they felt that the bird populations had multiplied successfully. During World War II, Penikese was considered a restricted area because nearby Gull Island was used as target practice. So it wasn't until the 1960s and 70s that the state really began their more intensive management of these bird species. So as I said, terns were under intense pressure from egg collecting and from plume hunters. Then gulls were some pretty severe predators of them in the 1930s to the 1970s. And then later the release of PCBs into the environment had a negative effect on these populations. So since the 70s, there's been a tremendous amount of effort on the state's part to help rebuild and restore these populations. And the Buzzards Bay Tern Project takes place on 3 islands in Buzzards Bay. Penikese is just one of those islands. And the roseate tern, which is a federally endangered bird, nests on all of these islands. And I found it was significant that 45% of the Northeast population of these terns nests here in our waters of Buzzards Bay. So I found the most recent data I could find is from 2019 from Penikese. So 887 common tern pairs were nesting, 15 roseate terns, 1 Arctic tern pair, which really was listed as 1.5 because an Arctic tern tried to mate with a common tern. So I thought that was funny, but anyway, 1 Arctic tern pair, and there were no least terns on Penikese. The least tern is another endangered bird. It's also worth noting that in the 1970s, biology professor Phil Stanton worked to build a breeding colony of eider ducks. So eiders tend to breed mostly, again, from Maine and into points north in Canada. And Phil Stanton thought at the time, if an oil spill were to destroy the colony in the Gulf of Maine, it would be nice to have a second colony established to help the population. So 182 eiders were transported between 1973 and 1975. And as of 2020, 870 eider pairs are now nesting from sort of the Boston Harbor Island area all the way down to Rhode Island. So that's thanks to Phil Stanton's efforts of relocating and working on this eider breeding program. So 1973, that finally gets us to the establishment of the Penikese Island School. So George Cadwallader, David Mash, Herman Bosch, and Carl Jackson established this private rehabilitation school for teenage delinquent boys. And their idea was that this school would also benefit the state and its efforts by helping deter illegal hunters and campers on the island to help the state's efforts in growing these endangered bird populations. The goal of the school was to teach by example, and they hoped to provide an experience for these troubled boys and help them become productive citizens and model responsible behavior and expose them to life with earnest adults. And I have some photos from the archives of sort of the beginning of the school here. So in the beginning, before they had built the schoolhouse, this 82-foot freighter was used as a dormitory. It had a wood stove and cozy bunks down below. And these are all photos of them building the original main house structure in the 70s. And the buildings, we have a main house and a schoolhouse. We have a woodshed and sort of a tool barn, and there was a larger chicken coop. And many of these buildings were built on the foundations from either the Anderson School or from the leprosarium. So life at the Penikese Island School included sort of tending the farm. There were pigs and chickens. There was lots of woodworking. There was some boat building. And there was a lot of chopping wood. The buildings were heated by wood, and the cooking stove was also heated by wood. And then during the 1990s, the original founders were no longer in charge, but new leadership carried the program through to 2011. And then the next phase of programming involved partnering with some organizations that wanted to do some substance abuse programming, but none of those partnerships continued for a significant amount of time. Which brings us to 2019, unfortunately, right before the pandemic, but this is when the Penikese Island School pivoted to their new mission of environmental education. So this beautiful remote island of Penikese provides the perfect setting for fostering environmental stewardship. And our new mission strives to provide these immersive educational experiences where Penikese Island is this live and living classroom for students to explore the world around them. And our current programming efforts fall into 3 general categories. And I'll walk you through each one. We have school trips, a summer camp, and what we're calling collaborative programs. So school trips, as the name suggests, these are day trips for local schools. And the idea is to get students from the Cape and Islands to explore their own backyard and get a sense of appreciation for our local coastal region. And as it turns out, many teachers share with us that even though we live in these coastal communities, often their students haven't spent time on boats or haven't spent time at the beach. And it's really valuable for us to share these experiences with kids from this region so that they're really able to experience their backyard and their local homeland and experience the beauty that is the Elizabeth Islands and Penikese in particular. So for some, the boat ride in and of itself is an experience. And when we get to Penikese Island, we always do a walking tour and history tour. And then we generally head down to the beach for an intertidal ecology sort of lesson. Occasionally we've partnered with art teachers and focused on art, or we've worked with English teachers if students have read Beyond the Bright Sea, which is a young adult novel that's set on Cuttyhunk and Penikese. And the idea is for students to be able to connect with each other, connect with nature, and be in this wonderfully unstructured environment that takes them away from their normal classroom lives and away from their normal social roles in their classrooms, and be able to connect with each other and with nature, especially after the pandemic. A lot of teachers report the social learning loss that occurred during the pandemic, not just the sort of academic loss. And so Penikese is a great place for these students to be able to connect with themselves in new ways and connect with each other, and for teachers to connect with them. So we really look forward to continuing to expand our programming and include more schools. At the moment, the entire 6th grade from Morse Pond goes out to Penikese, and we have quite a few schools from the Vineyard going, and we're looking forward to continuing to reach more schools for these sort of day trip field trips. The next arm of our programming is our summer science camp. For those of you that don't know the acronym STEAM, it started off as STEM, standing for science, technology, engineering, and math, but often includes the letter A for art. So the goal behind these camps is to empower girls and non-binary gender expansive youth in the sciences and provide them with an opportunity to connect with female role models from various fields of science. So women and non-binary genders continue to be underrepresented in the sciences. And part of that is that there are just fewer visuals, fewer role models and fewer examples of women in pop culture, in the media, and just in general in the sciences. So the structure of our camp, we have visiting scientists and artists come down and run workshops with these students. And we're hoping to sort of change the idea of what a scientist looks like, so that when you say scientist, kids don't immediately just picture a crazy-haired Albert Einstein in a white lab coat, that they can picture a bird biologist that's a woman that's wearing shorts and covered in dirt, or a marine robotics engineer that happens to look just like them. And so, as I said, we have these visiting scientists and artists come. The camp is structured as a week-long residential program. So girls spend Monday through Friday living and residing on the island with these guest instructors coming down for workshops on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we always have a birding workshop, because I think it's important that we honor the state's mission of rebuilding these endangered tern populations. And it's remarkable how many kids struggle to use binoculars and that simply just how to use binoculars and successfully find a bird that you see far away to then find it through your lenses is a valuable experience for these girls. We almost always have a few marine biologist guest instructors. We often do collecting trips, and then we'll bring these specimens back into the schoolhouse to either draw through biological illustration or to observe more closely under the microscope. We've been lucky enough to have the vet from the MBL come and do dissections each week with the girls. We've done robotics and building small ROVs or remotely operated vehicles, and then had our campers be driving them off the dock on Penikese. And again, we like to integrate art as well as science. And so this is an image of an artistic map that was a workshop, and then some girls are painting macroalgae illustrations here. We almost always have a photography workshop, so all of the images pictured here were taken by our students during one of the photography workshops this summer. So in addition to sort of academic programming that we have going on, it's also summertime. And so the girls are also just able to enjoy the island and explore and have fun and just be goofy middle schoolers and be silly and play games and have a skit night. And we operate camp as a device-free environment. And so we all know the benefits of taking a digital detox break and taking a break from social media. And for a lot of girls, it's a sort of new and wonderful experience to be able to pause and appreciate just sort of solitude and peace of being unplugged. And a place like Penikese is a wonderful place to experience that solitude and peace, being unplugged. And finally, the third arm of our programming is what we're calling collaborative programs. So this is where we partner with institutions whose missions and goals align with our own. And I'll give you a sample here. The University of Chicago has run a few courses in biogeography and species distribution the past 2 Septembers on Penikese. We had Next One Up, which is a mentorship program for inner city Baltimore youth, send some middle school boys out in June. That's them helping weigh some baby chicks. The Martha's Vineyard Regional High School has an alternative program called the Vine program, and they've come out for a retreat the past few years. Sea Education Association had their summer high school program visit. And as you will hear in a few moments, the Gull Island Institute spent a week on Penikese and will be spending a month on Penikese this June. We're also looking forward to some new collaborations with New Bedford Community Boating Center this summer and with the Wampanoag tribe of Mashpee. So I look forward to many future collaborations with other organizations, and I hope to continue to share this island and its natural beauty with many, many more students to come. Thank you. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin and Anna, who will tell you a bit more about their program, the Gull Island Institute.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kimberly. That was so enriching, even for those of us that are familiar with the history of Penikese. I feel like I learned so much. Yeah, so I'm Ana Kielson.
I'm Justin Reynolds.
And we're the co-executive directors and co-founders of the Gull Island Institute. I guess before I introduce ourselves and before I say a bit about our mission, just a thank you to Debbie and to Chris for organizing this and for inviting us to speak on the panel. We're totally honored. And also, I mean, we wouldn't be here without the Penikese Island School. So many thanks to Kimberly and to Jim and Cricket, who really, Gull Island wouldn't exist were it not for the Penikese Island School. So we're going to do a slightly different presentation. I'm just going to say a few words about who we are and our mission. Justin will give a little bit more detail and talk a little bit about why we founded Gull Island. And then we'll share some slides that show just some images from our programming that we've done. So Justin and I are both historians by trade. We both received our PhDs from Columbia in history, and since then have taught in a variety of different institutions of higher education. Columbia, Deep Springs College, where we were both on faculty, as well as Harvard University, where we've been for about the past 6 years, but are leaving to run Gull Island full time, which is very exciting. So what is the Gull Island Institute? We are a place-based liberal arts institution. Our mission is to cultivate democratic citizenship in an age of climate change. Our educational model is grounded in 3 pillars of rigorous academics, manual labor, and student self-governance. We first ran a pilot program in March of 2022, a week-long program out on Penikese, with about 9 students and 13 faculty. It was a great success. It was really exciting. And so we're currently now running, we're in the process of planning a 4-week program that will be between Penikese and Cuttyhunk from May 30th to June 25th, 2023. And the program is free of charge for all students. We're iteratively scaling up these different programs so that by 2024, 2025 will be, the hope is to begin a semester-long program. The program is for undergrads, advanced undergraduates, so students in their final years of college or who have recently graduated from college. And we can say a bit about that in a moment too. Our faculty come from across the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences, as well as tribal leaders and educators from both the Mashpee and the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribes, as well as other community leaders and business owners, including, for example, Seth Garfield, who is the owner of the Cuttyhunk Shellfish Farm. So maybe just one last thing. We're also in the process of working with other institutions to run other kinds of programming for teachers and students in institutions of higher learning in, we'll say, techniques of place-based learning grounded in the 3 pillars of academics, manual labor, and student self-governance. So maybe I'll leave it at that, and Justin can say a little bit more about why we founded Gull Island.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Ana said, thank you all for joining us and for making this event possible. And Ana mentioned that we've taught at some in a few different liberal arts institutions, and the project of Gull Island has really grown out of those experiences. So liberal arts colleges are really good places to learn how to read and write well, to explore an intellectual interest, and if you're lucky to find lifelong friendships, relationships. But they're not very good places to learn how to live well in an era of climate change. Now, we think that they can be, and we started the Gull Island Institute to show a way how. Doing this, we think, requires reimagining the place where liberal arts education takes place and preparing students with the skills and capacities to make places habitable wherever they are. So as Ana mentioned, this June, we are headed out to Penikese and Cuttyhunk with a small cohort of students and faculty for an experiment in place-based liberal arts education. The days will look something like this. So in the mornings, we'll convene for seminar, exploring through encounters with classic texts, as well as historical sources and indigenous knowledge traditions, the history and ecology of the area, and investigating what it means to inhabit it well. In the afternoons, we'll be laboring in particular will be laboring on the Cuttyhunk Shellfish Farms grants in West End Pond on Cuttyhunk. The oyster farm there, and helping to manage the bird sanctuary, and also preparing meals, doing the kind of labor that, you know, allows you to live on a precariously habitable place. And in the evenings rather, we'll be practicing self-governance in meetings where we will work out the ground rules of the community, coordinate the activities and operations of the program, and also shape the future of Gull Island Institute itself. And these are all capacities and tasks that the students have a primary role in. Just maybe one last question, because, you know, sometimes people ask us, you know, why do you have these three pillars of academics, labor, and self-governance? You know, why these three? And it's true. As Ana mentioned and Kim alluded to, these are not original to us. We were first exposed to this model when we taught at Deep Springs College, which is a college and a cattle ranch in Eastern California. But we have no particular allegiance to these pillars in themselves. Rather, we are using them as tools to enable liberal arts education to do something that it's not very good at doing at the moment, which is to cultivate an understanding of our place within the Earth's life-sustaining systems and a capacity to act on that knowledge. So that's why we think that a liberal arts education, not only in Penikese, but in all places, can expand in order to incorporate the labor through which we develop a civic relationship to the non-human and the land, and also self-governance to explore, you know, what is democratic citizenship going to look like in an age of new relationships between, you know, human beings and the ecosystems around them.
Maybe I'll also just add in, one last thing, because I imagine for those of you who are listening might have picked up on Kimberly's point about Penikese, Gull Island being used as target practice during World War II. And I anticipate that some of you might want to know why on Earth we might have named ourselves after an uninhabitable shoal that was once used for target practice and allegedly still has IEDs unexploded over there. So I think that, you know, we chose the name very much with that in mind, in the sense that, you know, well, first thing to say, Gull Island is uninhabitable, and it comes and goes with the tides. So it emphasizes the precarity of nature and natural landscapes and our relationship to it. I think also, you know, there's a tendency to romanticize nature and idealize it in many ways. And I think that the encounter that Gull Island historically has had between nature and culture, let's say, you know, just reminds us that there's no spot in nature that's sort of without human contact, and no human space that's also without some kind of relationship to an ecosystem around it. So we really wanted to kind of hang on to that because we think it's very important moving forward into the future. So
I'm aware of the time, but we do have a few pictures, if that would be an appropriate thing to share from the program that we ran in. Is this right?
Yeah, that's great.
From the program that we ran in March of last year, and yeah.
Why is it not? Oh, there we go. Okay, here, just down.
So we organized the trip out there during spring vacation for students, and the first weekend was a nasty nor'easter. So we were land bound. We were bound in Woods Hole. We were there unexpectedly for the first night, and here is one of our faculty, Adam Sobel, climatologist at Mount Doherty, walking us through the storm that we were experiencing at the time when we were being delayed from going out to Penikese in the Penikese Island office, Penikese Island office.
Yeah, we'll just keep going through. Yeah. Here we are having seminar. As Justin mentioned, every morning, the day began with a 3-hour seminar. And I have to say,
we're not seeing anything. We're just seeing like a blank screen.
Yep, right.
We thought you were making a joke about looking at gray skies.
Is that true for everyone? Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yes.
That's why. See, it shows here. I'm sorry about that. Just give us a second.
Sure.
There you go.
You may need to open the file first before you do a screen share.
Let's see. Huh. Okay.
Go. Can I do it?
Let's see.
No, it needs to-
Okay. It's still showing up as green. Oh, how about that?
Nope.
It's still gray.
Still gray.
Gray.
Sorry about that.
Nothing yet, but you can tell us about it.
Here, go to the Zoom
I think the host has to do the sharing.
and then go to share screen.
Make them a co-host.
They are co-hosts.
and then-
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how we did it before when we
Well,
practiced.
what program are you using to share it? The
You're in
photos?
Zoom
Okay.
rather than desktop.
No, I mean, what photo program?
Okay, one more time. No. Something, it's strange because when we did try it, we did do a dress rehearsal and this did not happen. So I'm not really sure what's going on.
All right.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. We can just, well, maybe we can move on. Yeah, so that's it.
I don't know what that
Yeah,
is.
I think we should just,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Sorry, chat is also disabled currently.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Oh,
And the questions never got answered.
hmm.
It's okay. I think,
So maybe we could answer the questions instead of,
Well, we'll wait for Justin and Anna to finish talking and then we can go to the questions. Actually, I saw questions that had been answered in my chat, so.
I think, I think since the images aren't going to come up, I think it's silly to kind of walk through. So I think we're happy to just go straight to questions.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so, well, thank you, Justin and Anna and Kimberly. Very interesting, and then we'll take some questions now, but I'm hearing that chat is not working, so I guess you will have to unmute yourselves and ask the question. Sorry. Anyone have questions?
I'm just going to share quickly. Here's an image of Penikese and the tiny sliver of Gull Island off to the side there, just so everyone can visualize the
Oh,
Gull
great.
Island that we're referring to.
Great.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I think actually, Kimberly, could you stop your share? Because then maybe, or is it?
It's now stopped, yes.
It stopped now? No, it's still not working for us. Yeah,
Oh,
okay,
Too
too
bad.
bad. It's okay. Okay. stop.
Okay, Susan Clark has raised her hand. Question.
Yes, for Deborah, have you ever considered the opportunity for adults to have programs on, I'm a little jealous that, that, the kids get to go over it. It'd be a fun thing for an adult group.
Well, we'll have Kimberly answer that question for us.
Definitely. You're not the first one to say, sign me up for camp. So we are still, as I said, we started with this new mission in 2019. And of course, 2020 was sort of lost to the pandemic. 2021 was sort of a soft opening. So last year was truly our first real year of programming. And yes, is the answer. We are working on growing our adult programming and activities that we will host on Penikese, but we just had started with these student and sort of middle school age focused programs. So stay tuned for more opportunities to come visit and explore Penikese as an adult.
Okay, Karen Epstein has a question for us now. Karen?
I'm just wondering, I understand that the school in Cuttyhunk also does some STEM programs now. Do you collaborate with them at all, or are they two separate, completely separate programs?
They are completely separate programs, yes.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Okay, Pamela has a question.
I have a question.
Unmute yourself, Pamela. Or
They're asking Pamela.
no, unmute. No, I guess she's not saying that. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, my question is whether or not this is strictly volunteer or are the students selected for this program in some way?
Is this a question for the Gull Island Institute?
Correct.
Sure. Yeah, we have an application. So the students were selected for our pilot, just given the experimental nature and the liability of what we were doing. For our June semester program, we have an open application. So we've been spreading the word pretty widely. Justin will drop in the chat the application link on our web page. So if you know of young people who might be interested, please encourage them to apply. And we've been doing active outreach again at different universities and colleges, within the tribes, again, with our colleagues there. So please spread the word.
Pamela, you're unmuted now.
Yes, this is mostly a comment. Ever since the Anderson School, there have been plant surveys done on Penikese Island approximately every 25 years, starting with the Marine Biological Lab and the Anderson School before that. And in Woods Hole now, we have the herbarium collection from 4 of those 5 surveys. And so there we have pressed plants starting from the 1800s.
Yes.
She mentioned botany in the botany class that was shown in the MBL picture. That was
Yes.
Kimberly.
We are due next year, I believe. I believe the last survey was done in 1999. So hopefully we can do some planning this year to execute another botanical survey next year. And I sort of am sensing potentially an exhibition showcasing some of these specimens and potentially some new modern additions and potentially getting some youth and some art involved. So stay tuned.
Also, the Eric Larson's class from Chicago had students looking at vegetation and collecting some plants back last year and the year before in September, but it was just, they were there for a week, like your classes. Camp.
Okay, anybody else have a question? Robin, unmute yourself, please.
Yep. Actually, I was wondering, what is the cost, for example, of that June semester class? I pulled up the application, but I didn't see a price list on it.
Yeah, it's free. It's totally free for everyone.
Okay. I'm tapped into the Dartmouth Environmental Studies students through my son, and it just strikes me as something some of them might be interested in. So thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah,
I'm not sure how it works. Their term ends early, but I don't think it's that early though. So, but I'll let people know about it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Please spread the word.
Do. And maybe, I don't know if I could just take a minute, Debbie, just to add in, you know, I said, I made a brief comment about how we're accepting students who are kind of at the end of their educational experience in the 4-year liberal arts environment. And I think one of the reasons why we made that decision or felt pretty quite strongly about it is that we feel that the purpose, and maybe this gets to why we're tuition free. The purpose of an education like this is so that young people go off and sort of seamlessly transition from asking questions in a liberal arts environment about how should I live? What should I value? How should I relate to the land? How should I relate to other people? How do I engage in a polity? With meaningful work that makes a public impact and serves the public good, kind of widely understood. And so as part of that, we are also working with the community, and you are the community, so we certainly welcome suggestions. And please be in contact if you have thoughts or ideas. We're identifying local partners in the labs, in sciences, in business, in education, called a Pathways to Service program, so that young people kind of finishing college then begin to see a way that they can continue to ask questions that resonate for them in their college experience with, quote unquote, the rest of their lives. Many college students sort of are meant to feel like college ends and, your life's kind of over, and then your grown-up life begins and there's this sort of break. But we believe that there should be continuity, and that, and some of this is also influenced by our experience teaching at Harvard, for example, where many of our graduates do go off into the corporate world